The rain had just stopped when Matteo noticed the handbag on the bench near the bus stop. It was expensive, leather still glossy despite the weather. The kind of bag he had only seen through shop windows. People hurried past it without looking twice, eyes fixed on their phones or the grey pavement. Matteo hesitated. He was tired, his shoes soaked, his back aching from a long day of odd jobs that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. Still, something about leaving it there felt wrong. He picked it up carefully, as if it might accuse him. Inside were neatly arranged items, a wallet, documents, a phone, keys, and a small notebook with elegant handwriting. No cash spilled out, no dramatic clues, just a life condensed into leather and metal. Matteo sighed. Turning it in would take time he didn't have, but keeping it wasn't even a thought. He had been raised to believe that what wasn't yours could never truly help you. He walked to the nearby cafe, the only place still open, and asked the barista if anyone had been looking for a bag. The barista shook her head. Matteo then noticed the phone buzzing. A name flashed on the screen. He didn't answer. Privacy mattered, but he memorized it. Outside, the sky cleared, and the city lights came on. An hour later, a woman appeared, scanning faces with growing panic. She was well dressed, but there was something tired in her eyes, a crack in the confidence her posture suggested. Matteo approached slowly, holding the bag out at arm's length. "Excuse me," he said, voice gentle. "Is this yours?" Relief washed over her face so fast it startled him. Yes, it is. I thought I'd lost everything." She clutched the bag, then looked up at him. "Thank you. You have no idea." He shrugged, embarrassed by the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. He turned to leave, but she stopped him, insisting on a reward. Matteo refused. He explained that he'd only done what was right. The woman studied him, curiosity replacing relief. She asked his name. He told her. She introduced herself simply as Eleanor. They stood there longer than necessary, talking about nothing and everything, about rainstorms, missed buses, and how cities make people forget to look at one another. Matteo didn't know who she really was. He didn't see the invisible empire behind her calm smile, the businesses she owned, the influence she carried. He only saw a woman who'd been scared of losing something important, and a moment where doing the right thing felt heavier and more necessary than money. As they parted, Elena looked back once, thoughtful. Matteo walked home lighter, unaware that this small, honest choice had quietly changed the course of his life. Matteo didn't think about Elena again that night. He cooked a simple meal, folded his worn jacket, and fell asleep with the calm satisfaction that came from doing one decent thing in an otherwise ordinary day. Life resumed its familiar rhythm the next morning, early buses, short-term jobs, and the quiet arithmetic of stretching little money as far as possible. 3 days later, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another contractor cancelling work. But something told him to answer. "Matteo?" the woman asked. "Yes, this is Elena. We met at the bus stop. You returned my handbag." He remembered her voice instantly. "Of course. I hope everything was inside." "It was everything," she said. Then she paused. "I was hoping we could talk properly. Coffee, maybe?" Matteo hesitated. His instinct was to say no. People from different worlds didn't usually cross paths again. But curiosity won. They agreed to meet at a modest cafe near the river. His suggestion, not hers. When Elena arrived, she dressed simply, almost deliberately understated. Yet people still seemed to notice her. She listened intently as Matteo spoke about his work, his mother's illness, the jobs that came and went. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity him either, which surprised him. Then she began to share pieces of her own life, carefully chosen ones. She spoke of responsibility, pressure, and loneliness at the top. Only then did Matteo sense that her life was far larger than she'd first let on. "Matteo," she finally said, looking at him directly, "do you know why I wanted to see you again?" He shook his head. "Because in a city where everyone calculates gain, you acted without asking what you'd get back. That's rare." She offered him a business card. The name embossed on it made his breath catch. He'd seen it before, on buildings, billboards, headlines. She wasn't just wealthy. She owned entire companies. Whole districts seemed to move at her decision. "I'm not offering charity," Elena continued, anticipating his reaction. "I'm offering opportunity. I need people I can trust, people who don't reach for what isn't theirs." Matteo stared at the card, conflicted. Pride urged him to refuse. Responsibility urged him to listen. "I don't know anything about your world," he said honestly. Elena smiled. "Then you won't be corrupted by it." As they parted, Matteo felt the weight of a choice forming, one that could pull him out of survival mode and into something unknown. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a closed door. It felt like a question, quietly waiting for his answer. Matteo didn't give Elena an answer right away. He spent the night pacing his small apartment, the business card heavy in his pocket. Opportunity had knocked before, disguised as false promises and short-lived luck. But this felt different, not because of the money behind it, but because of the way it had arrived. Quietly, through honesty rather than ambition. The next morning he called her. They met at one of her company offices, a glass building that reflected the sky like it belonged to another world. Matteo felt out of place in his worn clothes, but no one treated him that way. Elena greeted him, without ceremony, and led him through hallways humming with purpose. She didn't give him a desk or a title that day. Instead, she gave him time. She introduced him to managers, not as a charity case, but as someone whose judgment she trusted. His role was simple at first: observe, report honestly, ask questions others were afraid to ask. It was harder than any physical labor he'd done. Integrity, he realized, required constant attention. Weeks passed. Matteo learned quickly. He spoke when something felt wrong, even when it made people uncomfortable. Elena noticed. More importantly, others did too. Slowly, trust followed. One afternoon, Elena invited him to lunch on the rooftop. The city stretched beneath them, alive and indifferent. "You could have kept that bag," she said suddenly. "No one would have known." Matteo shrugged. "I would have known." She nodded, as if that confirmed everything. "That's why I put entire divisions under your review. Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest." News traveled fast. People whispered about the man from the bus stop. Some doubted him. Some resented him. Matteo kept working, focused on the quiet promise he'd made to himself. Never become someone he wouldn't recognize. Months later, Matteo stood again at that same bus stop. This time, he wasn't looking for lost things. He was remembering who he had been. He donated to shelters nearby, not in Elena's name, not in his, just because he could. The world hadn't changed overnight. He hadn't become powerful in the way people imagined, but his life had shifted at a deeper level. One honest choice had created a bridge between two worlds, and he walked it without forgetting where he started. And Elena, she gained something no amount of wealth could buy: the certainty that integrity still existed, waiting quietly to be noticed.